Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of the intersection between faith and sustainability, the handbook in the middle, Greening Congregations Handbook, has a lot of, it's 10 years old at this point, but it's got a lot of those connections from an interfaith perspective, mostly Christian, but interfaith perspective, and a lot of reflections and good quotes to use if you're doing morning watch. I mean, we all know that the Bible is rife with image of, land-based imagery, earth, air, water. Food is used, from an allegorical standpoint. I mean, there's no lack of material, and there's definitely people here who are way more versed in that than I am, but there's lots of ways to lots of entry points where we can get to this connection between why we're here, what we believe, and how nature is a part of it. Personally, this place is where I really started connecting with nature and really feeling that community here and having nature be so integral to that. So just being here alone is gonna be can be a very transformational experience. And hopefully we can come up with a lot of ideas on how to access and enliven that connection. So these pathways to a sustainable future, also a little bit, some of the facts in there are a little dated at this point, but has a lot of great activities, little simple activities you can do with young people to just kind of make them start thinking about this sort of thing. Like one, for example, in the beginning, there's a Birds of Deserts story that's very Dr. Seussian, Lorax-like, that comes with discussion questions, and you can create a little play out of it. You're welcome. I'll leave these here for the rest of the weekend. Please don't take them away with you, but you're welcome to look through them while you're here. It also has one activity in there that I really enjoy doing. It's an auditory experience of how much trash we throw away every day, from an individual, community, nation standpoint, using dried peas and beans. It's pretty powerful. So those are some ideas. I would like to, if we come up with anything great, I want us all to be able to remember it. So if you feel inspired to write something down, please do. Other things, service projects, definitely. Kids really enjoy that. Greg, the site manager, is doing a lot of integrated pest management, for example. There's a particular bush that is tick habitat, and he's been doing an eradication. So I had a sustainability conference. I was dean last year, and we did a service project, and the kids really enjoyed it. They get to swing.
What is it eradicated?
Of course you asked that, and I can't remember.
Barbary?
Yes, thank you. Yeah.
That and you want the same thing on our campus with the tacky.
Yeah. So instead of spraying pesticides down, we're manually going after these tick habitats. So that's one service project he's got. I'm sure plenty of other service projects that we can do. Of course, there's always the garden. There will be a lot of garden this summer. Planning on more than doubling the size, possibly tripling the size of the garden. So that's an excellent way to get kids. And I found last year, some kids who may not be very extroverted really, really get down in the garden. I mean, they really, I learned a lot about some really interesting things about kids as they were pulling weeds or picking cherry tomatoes or whatever. So if in your themes you can think about how to connect it. Like last year there was a Harry Potter themed conference, and a whole bunch of fourth graders came up to me, running up to me in the garden saying, "We're ready for our herbology class," and so I was like, excellent, let's go look at the magical creatures in the compost. Really neat intersections of theme areas to get kids inspired. I have a solar oven that I'm more than happy to offer to your programming. And I was just talking with Amber about having arts and crafts provide the resources and the direction to help your kids make their own solar ovens. And you can have a little baking activity to, make some, zucchini bread, zucchini from the garden or something like that, if you're in the right week. And we're happy to facilitate that. Let's see what else. You talked about using recycled materials for instruments. You could do a little trash to art festival. In my conference last year, we collected all of our we stopped ETF from taking our recycling all week, and on Friday we did a little activity called The River, where you split the kids up into groups and they create little communities by the river, and it creates and it gives them a chance to be creative with, and it was really amazing what the kids did in terms of what they decided to build and how they built it, and it creates some nice entry points for discussions about what happens downstream from what you're doing. What pollution, or if you have a fishery up here, then what are the people down here going to eat? Or if you have one kid made a nuclear power plant right next to the river, and I was like, okay, what about this fishery down here? And where's that nuclear waste going? And so there's some nice discussion points there. Another thing we did was to collect I collected one-sided paper ahead of time, and on that Sunday awkward time when kids are showing up, we had kids create their own one-sided paper journals. We gave them some materials to bind it, and they could use it throughout the week for their reflections or whatever. And if you're doing morning watch, I remember as a conferee, morning watch was such a nice time for me, just to have time for myself, and we had these little reflections and quotes that we could inspire thought or not. And again, like I said earlier, there's lots of resources for that as well. So those are just some of the ideas that I came up with. Does anybody else have other ideas that, and like I said last night, I'm happy to create, or for those of you who missed it last night, this is the workshop that I have planned, and that I'll be, it will be held at the garden at the compost. It will be the discussion about starting off with climate change and figuring out where everybody is in terms of their knowledge about what's going on. And then from there, talking about our impact on the earth as it relates to food consumption, where it comes from, how it's grown, who is involved in getting our food to our table, and how are they treated. Is that a just system? Why it's better to choose organic or local versus conventionally grown industrial agriculture, and all those things. And I'll explain how we are garden, why we're doing what we're doing at the garden. We're going to be doing some permaculture and some companion planting, and a lot that we'll be able to that I'll be able to use as part of the conversation. And we'll also move over to the compost pile and talk about the other end of the consumption as part of how Silver Lake is trying to reduce its environmental footprint. So that's going to be the workshop that, the interest group that you can just go ahead and, or interest group or workshop that you can schedule for. If you would like to work with me to create a custom one for your theme, for example, coming at it from the perspective of, you were saying, something you said triggered me, and I wrote it down, from the perspective of natural disasters, and going from disaster relief to disaster recovery, like how do we change those?
One of the things that struck me, a lot of the things that cause natural disasters, be it tornadoes, drought, volcanic eruptions, are all the same resources that we tap for sustainability. Mm-hmm. Wind power, electrical generation through solar, geothermal. Mm-hmm. And so what an extreme case can be very damaging is actually something that we can use to sustain ourselves.
Yeah, that's a great connection. And of course, talking about climate change and how we've seen more natural disasters, and how our storms are getting more powerful and more frequent. And from the justice perspective, who are the communities that are going to be most heavily burdened by rising floodwaters? And
Well, the justice, yeah, is really important given the socioeconomic
absolutely.
capacity of the community and their ability to recover.
Right.
Who gets more resources than others, and what does that mean, and how can we assist with that?
Exactly. Who can just hop in a car and
Haiti,
leave?
Katrina both come to mind as places that, haven't gotten enough resources.
Exactly.
The workshop that you have planned, is that a sort of a 1 hour block of time or a longer block of time?
It could be an hour. It could also be longer. I will try to fit it into 1 hour.
Okay.
But I would say if you really want your kids to have the chance to really work in the garden, I'd say sign up for the garden, I'm still working out how often I'm going to offer it. I think probably maybe on a Monday and a Thursday it'll be garden chore day. So you can, I'm still going to work out those details, but that makes sense to me anyway. So that'll be the real opportunity to less talk, more.
And that's my other question, is whether the workshop you're designing is particularly age appropriate for one age, or if you're adapting
To
to.
adapt.
Okay.
So, and with the older groups, if they kind of, they get it, they're, if I see their attention is waning because they've talked about this already, I'll just get into a garden chore from there. And we can,
Yeah, sort of at the other end of
yeah,
with the sixth graders and keeping them
yeah,
engaged this way.
yeah.
Okay. So you'll just define 2 days when the garden will be open?
Yes, and right now I am going to say Monday and Thursday. It's a good split, just in terms of having enough to do. No, I'm pretty sure there's going to be plenty to do.
Could we?
There's always the chickens for the 5th and 6th graders. We could always go and, say hey to them and help clean out their coop.
Can you think of any ways that we could utilize the garden, think about art projects, while not wasting food, but doing leaf prints, getting a couple of eggplant leaves and being able to do a leaf print art project? I mean, if you've got 40 kids, you don't want to strip an eggplant plant of all its leaves.
Right.
But if there's a way that we could connect being in the garden and then taking something away, potato prints,
Yeah.
that isn't undermining our own argument about utilizing our resources well. So
Yeah.
maybe it's stuff that's already been.
You dye your potato with beets and then you eat it after you're done cooking.
Cook it in the solar oven. And
Right, exactly.
Beet potato in the solar.
And then everybody to the composting.
And then you got potato chips and beet chips out of those.
Right. I'll think more about that.
Play around with.
We'll touch base. And that's the other thing. This is not the only forum for this discussion. I'll make my email address available to you. I'm on the Facebook page for the deans, and we can continue this conversation. I hope we do. So, but yeah, we'll check in. On that.
Speaking of the Facebook page, I was aware that, I was putting a few things out to sort of tickle people's imagination about their curriculum. I loved that idea of taking the bird seed and, making a labyrinth on the field, and then I thought, are there any negatives to that? And you're just constantly in a variety of contexts in your life and find yourself in different places, and what seems like a good idea in one place isn't necessarily a good idea in another place or context. So I would just encourage you, Pam, as this work develops, for you to just create, whatever single page or double page or whatever PDF documents or messages to us to give us more insight about the context here and how, just ideas that we might conceive of or might be presented to us sort of might be judged or perceived through the Silver Lake sustainability lens, so that we can decide whether or not they're worthwhile projects or what adjustments we need to make them worthwhile projects, because I think that would be helpful.
Okay. I'll talk with you a little later about, a little bit more about that, because that sounds like a great idea. I just want to make sure I understand what
Sort
you're.
of things to think about as we're developing
Yeah,
our projects.
So I'm thinking, so what's the
impact?
downside of taking all this bird seed and, you know, like, is there a downside? And, you know, I just.
Fat squirrels.
Not enough is being done about
Squirrel attacks, I don't know. But anyway,
I
yeah.
had kind of a question for the older group, like I think with the high school kids, they're already maybe working in some of this in their own communities and their own like churches and schools, and they might have dealt with some of this already, and I'm kind of one of like I want to challenge them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, one of the things that surprised me when I worked here is like the partners in service volunteers, like how much of Silver Lake's operating budget goes to paying the electric bill? You know what I mean? Like Amber and I brought that up to them because we're like a very power-heavy conference, we're a resource-heavy conference. We try to be like aware of what we're doing and how we're using that. I'd love to find some way to be able to give them an overview of like, okay, as a conference, we're 40 people, we're here for a week, we're in the Cedars, we use this many gallons of water, we use this many kilowatt hours of electricity.
Is there a way to gauge
Like
which
get an
building,
average
like,
of that and be
how
like,
much
can we
our
bring it down
building
from
is
like
using?
Sunday, we're here not thinking about it. But if we
Yeah.
try a little bit and think about it, how much lower could we get
Yeah.
that number for a 40-person
Yes,
conference?
I would love to do an
You should
unplugged
talk
day
with
our
Stephanie
kids
about
where
that.
we're
She's been working
acoustic
really
and
hard
we're
over
not
the last
using
several
air.
months
Super
on
nice.
a cost analysis of the entire operation, which is including looking at utilities. It includes a lot of things, you know, salaries, utilities, food costs, all of that across the entire year, building by building. So if you really do want that information, talk to Stephanie. She can
Yeah,
really help you.
because I would love to do a day of acoustic unplugged, just so they could see.
Or I was thinking like
What
a
the
power hour,
difference is.
after
Yes.
dinner, like everybody just come back, Vespers by candlelight, everybody like go to bed, like see what we're
they're
living.
really, the impact, because they didn't really, we had a hard time, like our first year we used so much power, it was overwhelming, and then last year we tried so hard, but it was difficult without having like something to show them or something to.
Well, maybe a good conversation to have in the beginning then is a very foundational conversation about where does electricity come from? How is it created in this part of the world? And, you know, really just watch, you know, go through every single step to the light switch. And then, you know, electricity can't be stored, so it's, you
Yeah,
know.
because we definitely talk about like how much we use, and that's one of our first conversations with them is.
I want to go
limiting it.
past the like use one paper towel in the bathroom because I think if they're charged to be, if we're talking about environmental stewardship and they love Silver Lake and they're charged to be like environmental stewards of Silver Lake, you know, in the same way that someone might fall in love with like saving the dolphins or saving like, you know, like horses being processed or something like that. Like if you can give them like a personal reason to care and engage them, like and use Silver Lake and how we're affected there and how it affects, you know, the ability to like offer this programming to them, that maybe that they would latch on a little bit and get excited about.
Something Jen was just telling me was making me think that what you were trying to do with your, it could be something as simple as having meter reading every day for the building.
Right, that's what I was
If you knew,
thinking
if
was
you knew what
we
the
could read
baseline
meter.
operational cost was for this building,
Yeah.
with nobody's in it in the winter, or you know, for whatever this time of the year is, heating and cooling costs, versus an average conference versus your conference.
Versus
you
our
can say,
conference.
oh guys, do you know that we use
That's
almost
real
twice the
ways.
power? Let's see if we can knock it down by 10%
Rack of
tomorrow.
Ages, we're 10%
And you
of
go out
our
and read the
whole
meter.
summer electricity
Yeah,
bill.
exactly.
Like,
Yeah, exactly.
And that's really, you know, because
That's a
I
great
think about that, I'm like, you know, I'll go through and I'll just unplug all their chargers.
Yeah.
And I shouldn't
But
be
it-
unplugging
then
their
it's-
chargers, they should be unplugging their chargers. And that
Then it
it's
gives them something to
lost.
work for. It's like it's an actual tangible result. Like at the end of the day, like how did you do?
Yeah, that's great.
And did you make your end goal using less resources, and was it lessened or heightened by the process in which you got to your end goal?
Yeah.
Is it a better tomato because you didn't ship it from across the country? You know what I mean? Like, is it a better song because we didn't leave the
Right.
amp running all day?
Well,
you know?
right.
Like-
Yeah. Was the song better or worse because we were at 5 or we were at 10?
Right.
You know, it's like being at 5, we still produce the same thing, but we lose half the amount of power.
I was kind of joking about carbon credits, but actually thinking, you know, so the next step after identifying what the numbers are is, you know, saying, if there's some activity that's identified with each 10% increase in the energy we spend, so all right, we spent this much today, that means tomorrow we're spending 15 minutes in the garden for each of those, or we're
Ooh.
planting a tree
That's
for
a
each of
really
those.
The tree was like, I was gonna try to get a tree to offset, and I just have to see how expensive trees are, but
Well, we're actually, for 4-1 Earth, we're setting up a donation for, or a means by which you can donate money to Silver Lake so that we can purchase trees to plant here. So maybe we can just keep that up and running through the summer, and if in addition to mission or whatever, if your kids feel.
we would really like that, because I always
Inspired.
wanna make a sign, and there's always like
Yeah.
something, like, even instead of that, it's like, okay, there's the tree, like, there's our 2013 tree.
Almost like instead of the banners.
Right, exactly,
Right.
exactly.
Yeah.
yeah.
Planting a
Yeah.
tree, I like that.
That
Put a
would be
little
great.
plaque.
Little
this is
plaque
our-
that they can all do, absolutely.
As long as somebody's wise about where the tree goes.
Oh yeah, Greg
Yeah.
has areas,
Plan.
has a plan for where he wants to increase
Doing little round
tree covers.
Pammy, have you heard of the Green Cup Challenge?
The Green Cup.
Green Cup Challenge?
No.
Our school's done it for 2 or 3 years, and this is not a unique idea. Somebody else came up with it, but it's been getting some traction in schools around the country. We actually created our own little green cup, and it's actually like a little brass cup with like frogs holding it up.
Nice.
And it's incorporating some of these ideas like the meter reading that we were just talking about, or the carbon credits that you were talking about, where we actually have basically a week or 2 weeks where the whole campus, our different divisions compete, our upper school, our middle school, our lower school, and we do meter readings every day, and each division is trying to lower their consumption, and at the same time, in the classrooms, they're doing, age-appropriate sustainability education. So the kids, if they're like, look, it's been a little bit cold, electric cold this week, so we had to use some more heat, but we offset that by making posters to teach people about sustainability, so they can earn some credits back. And so we pit the different divisions against each other, so the kids can try and win the Green Cup for their division. But I think that's a model that you could maybe transfer here.
That's a great idea.
If you had a couple of conferences in any given week. And again, this comes down to knowing what your sort of baseline consumption is and operational costs are. If you have some of those figures, then you can start to compete either against whatever the standard average is within your own conference, or maybe you had different conferences competing against each other.
I'll do anything for a trophy.
That's a great idea, thank you.
3 resources I wanted to mention, and I don't know if one of them is still around. There used to be a resource that was available from the DEP called Project Learning Tree. Do you know about that, Pam? It was available to scout troops and other organizations that work with young people. It was sort of an early sustainability, but it had great, some timeless ideas in there for some of these things, which was really cool. I don't know if you all know about TED Talks.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's some great sustainability
Oh,
TED
yeah.
Talks, so if you guys had a rainy day,
And
you just want to get a
food
little
ones, too.
deeper into it, Yeah,
Food-related ones.
yeah, absolutely.
That's, yeah.
And the other, especially for older kids, I wouldn't use them maybe for my group, but, and the other resource actually for our groups, there's a great story called Partners in the Midrash book that Mark Gelman did, Rabbi Mark Gelman, called Does God Have a Big Toe? I took another story from that book basically to contrive my last conference, but the partner story is really just wonderfully done, very playful, and just really gets at the creation stories in another way. So if you're familiar with that, that's a great story. So the book is called Does God Have a Big Toe by Mark Gelman, but the story is called Partners. And it's based on the 2 creation stories. So.
I have a question. Mentioning TED Talks just made me think of where do we stand with sort of connectivity to the internet and technology here. I know for our conference, one of the gifts that we wanted to give our kids was to allow them to be unplugged a lot.
Yeah.
But I'm also thinking there may be times where we've got a really cool resource like a TED Talk or something that we want to share that seems appropriate.
We can arrange that, there is a network here, but it's password protected, so you can't, the kids can't get on it. But if you want to get on it, and it's not everywhere, so you can't get it at the Glen. But if you wanted, if we wanted to set up something like,
In the basement.
yeah,
viewing in the
or
basement.
on the porch of the HWC or something like that, you can get internet and hopefully in the summer office, so we could set up something out on those picnic tables to show. Again, it's password protected, so it's not open internet, but
So but there's no connectivity into the line at all, right?
nope.
Okay.
Is that where you are?
Yeah, I think so.
We haven't done any building
A lot
assignments
of
yet.
those talks will come as podcasts,
Yeah.
which you can record. Then all you need is the electricity. You don't need the internet component. You can handle
Yeah,
that.
and
in
I'm sure I
advance.
could download a lot of resources ahead of time, but there's this sort of natural thing where I share a resource and then somebody else says, I've got something that you would love.
Right.
And
That,
then on
you
the
know,
fly, like.
Yeah, that opportunity then, so, you know,
We just have to work around it, like, yeah, be planful about it.
yeah.
The other thing is thinking about, we were talking yesterday about rainy day activities and having movies. Be conscious, again, of the movie themes. Like last year, we had a spectacularly rainy week, but we came prepared with the movie Avatar, which has huge environmental messages and yet is still relevant and awesome. All the magic of the world is in a seed, yeah.
Both 2 DVDs that will be here this summer.
So those are some other ideas. And be meaningful and have conversations to connect it back. So, I really like this idea of meter readings for your
I
child.
love the meter readings idea.
Yeah.
I think that
Yeah, I
is
think that's
definitely
going in.
something we're gonna get on for our group.
Yeah, I'll talk with Steph and Ray.
I'm just interested at this point now.
Has anybody recycled paper? Is that a craft project that's
We
been
have.
done in our?
We have.
I also have a good recipe for tea dyeing your own paper if you want to make like stationery or wrapping
Yeah.
paper.
Actually, one of
You
the,
can reuse like old tea bags from breakfast. You know what I mean? You just dump them all into like a large bin and you can tea dye. It makes this really nice old brown like general store paper.
and one of the arts and crafts projects that's going to be offered is making paper this year, which is, that is gonna be
Oh,
offered.
cool.
So, and that's all using recycled papers, because you can use really any recycled paper for it, so,
Excellent.
yeah, I took a nice little seminar on that, so.
We're
Awesome.
gonna do that.
Working blenders and rust.
I actually have one. I have 2 food processors still in a box that were here all summer last year and did not get used once, so. Well,
For
one
making
time it
paper?
got, for making paper, one time I got used to make salad for the lizard. So.
The other thing is, and I'm going to talk with staff about their own education about somebody said it last night too about our ecosystem. Understanding, we have woods, we're on a hill, we have wetlands, we have a pond. And while I was a kid, I thought that pond was so murky, ew. But it serves a very important purpose. And what's the difference between a pond and a lake? And what sort of animals and plants are supported here? And are there wetlands or lakes or ponds near you that are suffering from some sort of invasive species? And what is that? What is your community doing? And just trying to engage with them on this place, this ecosystem, this bioregion. How we're doing it.
I think you could even do, I don't know like that it's ever been done before and you'd have to reach out to the town, but because the town and Silver Lake builds beaches every year, like they truck in sand to like even out and make nice their beaches, like what kind of impact have we had to have a nice beach at camp, like on the pond that already exists, like on the pond that already existed here.
And I know, and Greg has been working really hard to stem the flows of stormwater that come down to ruin that beach. So that's another good thing about it.
A really easy way to look, like if you are thinking about talking about the differences between like stream life and pond life, an easy way to really get a good look at what's going on under the water without disturbing anything is to really take a mason jar, which we'll have in the nature center with a flashlight in it tied to a string and literally dropping it down because it illuminates underneath the pond. You really can see how far down these lily pads do go, that they actually do have roots down at the bottom, and the whole entire story of things coming out of the muck and up to the sun and all the beautiful metaphors you can have with that. It's a really easy way to get a look at something without stirring it up.
What do you drop down in a mason jar?
You actually put a flashlight in a mason jar, seal it, and put a string on it and actually drop it into the water because it'll illuminate everything around it underwater.
At night off the docks, that would be super cool.
Yeah, we did it one time last year in nature class, that the one group I could get to actually happily go down to the hill. Down the hill. And it actually was really fun.
In the daytime?
Oh, it works great in the daytime. If you're doing the pond, especially over by like where the boathouse is, as long as you kind of steer clear of the boathouse, because that is, you know, where people live. But where that's all lily padded and you really just can't see past the first inch, really, it worked really nice.
And people are always talking about there's spiders on the docks or the, you know.
Wolf spiders.
Well, why are they there? What purpose do they serve?
You keep them in the wolf puppy.
Exactly.
Those spiders go on
Good
walls.
thing.
Have you ever seen the size of those things?
I wouldn't be surprised.
I was at a community meeting a couple nights ago in my town held by the Board of Education about changes that they're making in the school system there, strategic changes in how we do teaching. And one of the things they talked about, which is therefore now on my brain, is a shift towards learning by collaborative problem solving. So rather than telling kids what the issue is, saying, here's the problem, what do you do with it? And handing it over. And it sounds to me like your river activity was partly that.
Yeah.
Sort of, but it strikes me that there might be a lot of other questions that we could pose, both that you could pose in terms of how you present yourself, but also that we could do, that an exercise could be.
Yeah.
You know, here's the problem. How do we engage this? What are the resources we need, and how do we do so? Because I'm also thinking about imagination and how we do creative problem solving.
There's an exercise that I've done a lot of times in community involvement work, and I did it last year with my conference to do our covenant, which is called a Treasures Challenge. Treasures, Challenges, and Visions. It's a post-it note exercise. You get you write treasures, challenges, visions on their own flip chart papers, and then you give the kids, depending on how big your group is, 2 or 3 post-it notes of different colors, so 3 different colors. And on the first one, you tell them to, and it depends, you can adapt it to what you're talking about, whether you're talking about what are the treasures of living in a community, what are the treasures of being here at Silver Lake, what are the treasures of, or what do you value most about this part of the world. And the kids, they don't, and this is why it's also great for introverts and extroverts. They write down their ideas and they go and stick it up on the treasures page, and then you move on to challenges. What are the biggest challenges we're facing here at camp, on Earth, in your communities, whatever. Or if you're doing the covenant building, what makes you feel, what makes you feel bad in community, or what would happen that would make your week not awesome? And so then they write their ideas down, they put them up, and while they're doing the challenges, have a counselor or codeine or whoever sort their post-it notes into categories, circle them, and write the main theme down. Do the same thing for the challenges, and then for the visions, what do you want to do? What are some things that we can do together to make sure that everybody's week is awesome? What can we do to make this place more to make this have more environmentally friendly existence here at Silver Lake, on the Earth, whatever. And then you go through and you say, okay, well, here's what you said. And, a lot of you thought that you really value anything. The food,
Local food.
The local food, yeah. Thank you. A lot of you valued being nice to each other, or not bullying or whatever. And you move through and you just discuss what those major themes came out. And it's a really powerful exercise so that the kids can see that, I wasn't alone in thinking that this is awesome or this sucks or whatever. And then when you get to the visions part, that is like the really, that's where we come to some decisions about how we're going to act to make it better. And it's great for them to own, have a great sense of ownership of what we've come up with, and it really means a lot more that way, so.
Those unpacking
Post-it notes.
questions that are collaborative learning that we do down the low ropes course, it dawned on me one year that those questions and those opportunities to unpack those challenges or learning opportunities or whatever it is need not stay at the low ropes course. They really need to come back with us to other aspects of our learning experience throughout the week. So one conference I had was called Wearable Parables. Tim came up with the title. I had to come up with the conference.
Oh, nice.
It was a great
Yeah.
title. And so one of the parables, this would be great for you rock guys. One of the parables we explored was the parable of the house on the rock and the house in the sand, and so what sustains us, so we broke them into small groups, the conferees, and we gave them, some of them, recycled paper, 20-pound paper, and some of them got recycled cardstock. They all got scissors and staplers and tape, and we asked them to build a house. And so they all got very busy building a house. What we did when they were done was we just unpacked it just like you would unpack a low ropes experience. So did leaders emerge? Where did your ideas come from? All of those questions that you want to ask. And then we took them down off the deck of the Glen, because we were at the Glen that year. We had a rock in the driveway, and we had a pile of sand in the driveway. And we put the paper houses on the sand and put the cardstock houses. And then we got mean with buckets of water. It really wasn't meant to be mean. It was just to sort of really enliven the parable. But the houses with the little 20-pound recycled paper just got destroyed, and the cardstock houses not so much. So it was just, it was just such a multi-layered experience, from taking the materials and saying, what are we building a house for? And beginning that process and talking among themselves, to really sort of doing those debrief questions about the experience, and then just like the wow of seeing that one house destroyed, the paper house destroyed, and the cardstock house was like, yeah, but that parable stayed with them, so.
About 5 minutes.
Just that sort of constant, I think that debrief, revisiting those questions, and making note of those collaborative experiences, and encouraging them and inviting them to use their ideas and their gifts, it has to be constant.
And with respect to having constant message, I'm gonna have table signs at the end with little factoids, maybe about where a particular food came from, or maybe little factoids about climate change or whatever. Something that might be a conversation starter for your tables. Anybody else? I think we've come up with a lot of great ideas. Sorry, I was not as great at being described, but again, I am more than happy to continue this conversation with each of you individually. If you want to do some conference-specific planning, I'm really excited to be part of it. So, thank you for being
How do they
here.
reach you?
How do you reach me? My email is pam@ctucc.org. Pam. No, I will never be able to say that without
Yeah,
and I
Just
will
for
CTUCC.
if you do start to decide on any scheduling or wanting to schedule things with Pam, and you're talking to her through email on that, my email is amberb@ctucc.org. So either CC me or anything like that, so I can make sure that it's getting updated in the schedule as soon as possible for you, so it'll be more